Welcome, everyone, to the Umana Yana Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Dripal, and today we have a very special edition of the podcast. It's actually a collaborative effort that's going to be released in a few different parts, and we're doing this with an organization called the CCICC. Now, you're probably wondering what all of those letters mean, and throughout this episode, I'm sure we're going to explain it at least once or twice for you. Now, before we jump on in, we're going to let our guests for today introduce themselves, and then we've got a great show for you. So, without further ado, take it away, my friends.
Varun, you're a fine young man. Go for it first.
All right. Thanks so much, Josh. Thank you for having us. My name is Varun Kumar. I'm a Guyanese-born fellow. Came over to this country in 1992 with my family of 5. I'm the youngest of 3. And the goal for my parents for my first migration was to get us educated in this first world country. So I grew up in this education system. I graduated from the University of Toronto Scarborough campus with a Bachelor of Business Administration, specializing in finance, and have been working in the public sector for the universities, York University and U of T for the last 9 years or so, since 2016. And I work in the Vice President's Research and Innovations Office, and enjoy what I do very much. But most importantly, growing up, I didn't recognize that I was going to Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sunday services with my father, who was, diehard Arya Samaj Hindu, and that was my lifestyle growing up. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, without realizing it. Now I have 2 children of my own, 5 and 7-year-old. My daughter's learning about identity in school, and that's really got me thinking, how do I teach my kids who they are and not forget their ancestors and their roots?
I love that. Well, thank you for being here with us today. I'm really excited for our conversation.
Yeah, that's
Thank
really
you.
good. I feel now I got to start about my own parents. So I'm going to tell you, my family's been here since the 1960s, late 60s. And my mother received a scholarship from Trinidad government to come over here and get a teaching degree. Because in those days, and I'd say all the way to the 80s, even in this country, many people were teaching, but without a university degree. And Trinidad was eager to catch up. My father had run a commercial school there as well. My name is Peter Deberan. Baptized a Presbyterian, which is a big thing in Trinidadian community in terms of religions. But we came from there straight to a city called Sudbury in Northern Ontario, where I spent over 6 years of my life there. When you're coming there from the age of 9 to almost 16, you definitely get a different sense of where you stand in the world. And in that world, very, very clearly, racism showed you where you stood in relation to the landscape. I'm going to tell you, in those days, in the 70s, they had a very shaky relationship with the environment, with who we call the indigenous peoples now, anybody of color. So I was regularly called the N-word, or basically ostracized or whatever. By the time I got to Toronto, which was the late 70s, it was a completely different world. It wasn't the Dark Side of the Moon or Inagata Davida or Led Zeppelin anymore. It was Earth, Wind and Fire, the Michael Jackson. It was a completely different world, which I loved, and identity shifted again because the people who were listening to that music in this country were Black. And for me, I was also considered that and consider myself that. And they embraced me very easily, not because I walked in and said, hey guys, I'm Black too, but because they recognized another person of color. So the West Indian community is, or was then, predominantly Black. I grew up in that milieu. I had a dance crew. We were doing dance competitions. We were on a TV show called Boogie. Later on, Electric Circus appeared on television. So I went in from a world where I saw myself one way, or the world saw me another way, into what people talk about in your career. You're going to have 5 careers. You know what? It just happened anyway, because over time I worked in television. My first couple of serious jobs was UNICEF, and then the second one for a year or so, and then the second one was government. I was in my late 20s. I worked in the government as a political aide, legislative, and an EA to a couple of cabinet ministers. And I'll tell you what happened there. it brought me face to face with other ethnic communities in this country, and I saw how they worked while my parents were attempting and were interfacing with different brown people and different West Indian people. But there was clearly a difference in terms of how people communicated with each other. So I always felt somewhat of an outsider. And around that time, me and my oldest sister kept asking my father, who are we? Who are we? Where are we really from? If we're not and Indians, I'm going to tell you, all the way into the mid-90s. I want to share this one with you too. Early 90s, I'm running up the steps at Vishnu Temple. By the way, folks, we're in Toronto or north of Toronto, Canada. And I'm doing this youth forum or whatever. And this woman stops me. She has a daughter with her. Says, tell me, who are you? What are you? Oh, do you go to school? Yes, at U of T. Do you speak Hindi? Man, as soon as I said no, she just turned around, did one of those, grabbed the daughter and pulled her away. All the way then, it was very, very clear we were not considered brown by the South Asian community. And in fact, to them and to lots of people, we were considered black. And when you think of the Canadian community, I wasn't that one of them either. And things changed. So I'm going to just end it here by saying I finished my career as a school principal with the largest school board in Canada. And again, working with the public has taught me it's even more important for us to really think about where we're going as a community, as Indo-Caribbean people and as Caribbean people.
Thank you for that, Peter. I appreciate it. And, for our guests, I think that, even our intros are very telling of our identity. I find that even with myself, our people, I do find that we have some of the relatively longer introductions, not because we're trying to steal a spotlight, but because it seems like there's a lot of explaining of ourselves in contrast to other things. We're not like our own thing. You know what I mean? So it's okay, we're kind of like that, but not like that, a little bit like that, but not totally, right? And I totally resonate with what you're sharing, especially Peter. I myself, people have been incredibly confused, when they look at you, they see the hair, they might see the style, all these kind of things, the way you speak, right? And it just throws them for constant loop after loop after loop. And I've seen this, what they almost call code switching happen, especially amongst our, Indo-Caribbean community, where it's kind of we speak different ways or act certain ways around different communities to be accepted and understood and all of these things, to not seem so alarming and, that kind of thing, right? So I'm so glad we're here to have this conversation around identity. Especially us as 3 Indo-Caribbean men who are sitting around to have this conversation around identity, right? To really peel it back and not just be the usual things around identity and just leave it at that, right? We're really here because we believe in different. We believe in a future that is different from our past. And that work has really shone through in what I've seen of the CCICC so far, and the people behind it, the team, the vision, all of that. So I'm so glad that we're here to really give people some insight, to really begin to understand how and why this organization is different, right? And I think you both are exemplary people to be part of this organization, to really show us how we can embody some of these things and really work towards different, right? Understanding that there are systems in place, right? But we need to be strategic if we're actually looking to break free of these chains that we've had around ourselves, right? So, thank you guys. I'm so ready for this great conversation today. And what I want to do to really set the tone for us, if you will, is to read out this introduction that we have co-created together, because I think it really outlines what we're here for, what we're about, and can really leave our viewers understanding what they're getting into, all right? So I'm just going to read this out for us, all right? Okay. There are moments where something shifts, not loudly, not all at once, but in a way that you can feel. And this feels like one of those moments. Because for a long time, Indo-Caribbean identity has lived in a certain kind of space, held through history, expressed through tradition, carried forward through generations. And that matters. But at some point, the question becomes, what do we do with what we've been given? Not just how do we preserve it, but how do we actually live it, evolve it, and shape it into something that reflects who we are now? This conversation is really about that. And where we are, and what we're still carrying, and what it looks like to begin defining what comes next, intentionally. Not as a reaction to the past, but as a conscious step forward. And that's where CCICC begins. Not as the answer, but as a space. A space for conversation, a space for expression, a space for creation. So wherever you're listening from, I'd invite you to arrive here for a moment, and let's get into it. All right, gentlemen. Well, identity. I think there's so many different directions that we can go, when it comes to identity. But here's the direction I want to start us off in. As you guys have had your own lived experiences and you've heard the stories of our elders, you've read the history books, and you've seen it through different people's perspectives, right? How would you describe Indo-Caribbean identity as it exists today, right? And where do you feel like we feel comfortable enough to fully express it, and where are we still evolving with it? Let's begin with you, Varun.
Well, I feel each area being in Toronto, whether if it's in Scarborough or in the GTA, be in Markham, or even in the West End, be in Brampton and so forth. Depending on where you grew up, that Indo-Caribbean identity may vary. For myself, and then of course for Peter, it might be much different. I grew up in the 90s in Scarborough. This was a place that there was many Caribbean families, right? So when I came here, my elementary school was actually fairly multicultural. We were predominantly brown and black and a little bit of Chinese, with the minority of Canadians or whites. Some of my teachers were even of Caribbean descent. I remember having Jamaican teachers, but not so much a Guyanese or Trinidadian teacher. So for me, in the 90s, Indo-Caribbean identity, I felt it was among me, right? But that could have also been part of my growing up with my parents and my father being so close to the Toronto Arya Samaj and the Mandir. That was a area and a safe space where he brought ourselves, my cousins, other like-minded families. So for me growing up, I felt included. However, as I grew older, into the 2000s and 2020s, things are starting to change. Now I'm no longer a student. Now I'm an adult. I'm into the real world. You're entering the corporate world. You're entering, you're seeing the different hierarchies within the system, multi-levels of, management. And then not until you're at that point do you start to see real differences and separation between, the barriers of what is identity, right? At some points, I don't see my Indo-Caribbean friends or family up here.
Right.
But I always, how do we get up here, right? Is it who we know? Is it what we know? Is it a combination of both? And how do we break into it? So now and today in the existence of Indo-Caribbean, I've moved up north. I've left the GTA, I left the Toronto, I left that comfort zone. I'm up north in Barrie. Well, now we're predominantly the school where my kids go is 95% white, and my kids are minority. So it really depends, right? Caribbean identity. There's a couple shops up here in Barrie that have like Debbie's Roti Shop. Love her, very amazing. They have good food, and it gives me, I even had dal and rice and saltfish I had for dinner from what I picked up from her today.
Okay.
So sometimes I crave these things and I can't make it, and so it's around me. But for my children is where I feel I don't see it existing, right? I don't see it existing in the elementary school. Certainly don't see it existing in the high schools around here. So this is what I'm trying to teach my child as she's in grade 2 learning social studies, social sciences. Who am I, right? So she's asked me, she's learning it right now. Her school is doing for the first time ever, a cultural mosaic. And it allows the parents who's volunteered to represent the country. So I'm proud to say this Thursday, I will be representing both Guyana and Trinidad at my children's cultural mosaic.
Wow.
And I was very excited for it.
A statement of peace too. Wow.
That's great. Well,
Love it.
remember, only the Trinis can dance. Don't overtax yourself there, buddy. Okay. I've maybe been here
I
a
guess we'll
long
see the
time, but I
Guyanese in
know
the
around
comments
dancing.
shortly.
Um,
Oh,
you know,
that's
that
awesome, man.
is
No, and you know what? I love what you shared there, you know, and I resonate with a lot of what you did share there. You know, especially that idea of like, you know, asking who am I, right? And I remember that. Like I think back to like when we were in school, like elementary school, and the only, you know, time I would see, say, my flag or have an idea that there's something outside of, say, what the history book is teaching us, say, is, you know, like how we would have those boards where they would pin up things, notices and stuff, and around the border they might have like the flag thing. Like I remember seeing the flag there a couple times, right? And that was like my only inkling that a culture outside of what we're learning here matters and is important and exists even for the most part, right? So I think it's so important that we intentionally create these spaces and understand, you know, the responsibility that we have in order to actually, it doesn't just happen organically, maybe, if you will, like it used to, right? Where the stories passed down, the traditions, the recipes, all that. We have to actually go out of our way to almost create these moments, right? And you know, I think that those are the people who are going to be most happy, right? Because we are making sure that these things do carry on and pass on. And you know, Peter, I would love to hear, you know, how you feel about this one, and you know
is
how you've seen the Caribbean identity, Indo-Caribbean identity evolve over time, you know, during your lifetime.
First of all, I mean, there's just so much to say about it because we are caught as a people in many ways between many identities, right? Colonization was brutal at the end of the day. But here's what I'm going to say. I think in many ways, we are as much the absence of something as we are the presence of something in terms of our identity. I think lots of Indians, especially those people like Varun's family and half of my family too, who are very staunch Hindus, who are vegetarian, etc., have this romantic vision of what India is supposed to be. This thing that stems from an incredible series of philosophies and great sages and stories. And there are also the movies, which is another powerful form
Right.
of mythology about what India is. And so people yearn for what they feel is going to be where a place where they would be have real belonging. And maybe that's what our ancestors or our parents felt, or Varun's parents might feel when they have all these, going back to the Vedas or going back to the temples. I don't know if that's the same for Muslims or Christians. I think Muslims obviously have a different picture in terms of Mecca and all that kind of stuff, so I can't speak to it. And I can say from a so-called Christian point of view, although I walked away from that religion formally around 17 or 18 after telling my parents that Christians weren't very Christian. Um, and I have, as a student of history on my own, have understood very well that, which is all common knowledge now, but 30, 40 years ago wasn't, which is Christ wasn't a white man, right? Leaving all that aside, the fact is we're not Indian. We did not come from a modern sensibility of India, which is still about caste and names and position. It is still, if not caste, it's still a highly formally hierarchical society, and we don't belong within it. And one of the reasons, and this is what I mean by absence, is in my own findings, I know that my mother certainly is Bengali, and my father is from part UP and part Gujarati. So what am I? The second part, the modern Hindi, it was never spoken by our people. You talk about Bhojpuri, but those people didn't come necessarily with that. There were Sikhs there, there were Tamils there. There were all sorts of people there. They had to create a language with two other existing languages, and you get this melange of identity. And language
Right.
is a big part of identity. So again, we don't speak that language, right? And we don't naturally behave the way they do. Even today, right now, when I meet Indians from India or Indians who are born here, it's clear that I move and think and interpret the world differently. And I'm sure you gentlemen would agree. And they do see
100%.
us differently. So the first thing I'm going to say is decades ago, I stopped trying to pretend I was Indian. I don't care, right?
Yeah.
And the reason is I believe that my personal self and my family and my ancestry and my memories are just as important as anybody else's. So I'm not trying to be Indian. I'm trying to be me. And that's hard,
Yeah,
right? And the reason I
agreed.
say it's hard is because I've been to India twice. One of my, now that I think about it, one of my previous iterations, I said I worked for UNICEF, but I also ended up volunteering for a group, and they gave me a ticket when I was 28 years old for free to go to India with them. And I traveled around, and then I realized India is not one country. South Asia is not one, all brown people are the same. That's ludicrous. Bengalis look physically different. Their clothing is different. Their facial features are different. Jewelry is different. And their language is different. Gujaratis, the same. Punjabis, the same. You go all over India with these great major states of 300 and 400 million people, which dwarf this country called Canada, and they're different people. So when I was
Right.
there with wonderful people, a few of them said to me, Peter, we can see you're Indian, but we can't quite tell where you're from or what you are.
Right.
And of course it made sense. I don't actually, and none of us really actually look like them. You get in a room with a bunch of Punjabis or a bunch of Bengalis or a bunch of Tamils, there's a general essence to them. You get in a room with a bunch of our people, and in the same family, you got this tall person or a short person or chubby person or curly-haired person. My hair used to be curly and wavy, light-skinned, dark-skinned, whatever, in the same family. Why?
Yeah.
Because we got all these genetics things happening. So I'm just going to say that for me, while I'm happy with me and still working on being the best me I can be, I think the idea of identity for our people is something in process all the time. And I find it particularly interesting when people are born here and they get together with each other, suddenly go into a very serious Guyanese or Trini accent as a way of belonging, as
Yeah.
opposed to the language we naturally speak if we want to progress in the
Mm.
society. And it's the one I'm speaking now. It's the one I've spoken the longest. And
Yeah.
because I feel it is necessary that we demonstrate to the outsider that we are their equal.
Mm. Yeah, I hear that. And I felt the pressure. I mean, like Varun, as you've been talking about, corporate spaces and, as you move up the hierarchies and you start to look around and, see the politics that exist between it and where do people exist and where do they not, right? I think that that's very much, a testament to that. It's like, even in my experience, I have also adopted those, what I'll call survival tactics, right? Really, leaning in more to my Carlton than my Will Smith, right? In all spaces, whether that is, being super preppy and, like the way I speak and enunciate, what I'm even seen reading and eating, all of these things, it is definitely a chess game that we're playing very consistently, right? And, whether that game is just one that we're still playing in our mind because we're still having trauma, or whether it's actually, live for us in the real actual setting, the bottom line is, I'm glad that we have more spaces where we can actually talk about this, right? Because when we release it by saying it, we're letting others know, hey, I noticed that too. Maybe there's something there. Maybe we got to check that out, right? So, I love that this is exactly what we're doing here. And, one thing that I've found incredibly interesting as I've looked at my own family when it comes to the Indo-Caribbean identity is, the things that we really maybe gravitate towards, Peter, like you were mentioning, like the accent sometimes comes out, when we recognize one of our people, even if we don't confirm with the flag, you're from here or whatever, right? That sort of happens. But I've also noticed it's very interesting to see what happens when families mix and there's multiple cultures in there and one that might, be what we could say opposite to, what those cultures are, right? And then what the children feel compelled to carry with them, maybe suppress, maybe deny, maybe totally lock out of their identity, right? I found that an incredibly interesting exploration to not only look at from a personal lens, but to step back and observe on a grander scale. Have you guys noticed anything when it comes to that?
Very quickly, I'm going to say that being Indo-Caribbean or being Caribbean is we are already brought up in a world of multiculturalism. So when Canada talks about bringing in people from all of, whether immigrants, refugees, or whatever they're bringing in, chances are a Chinese person never saw anybody but a Chinese person where they came from. Chances are Ukrainian people will not see it. Israeli people will not see it. A Ghanaian person will not see it. But if you're from the Caribbean, you have a neighbor who might be Chinese. You have the older couple across the street were Muslim. The people down the street were Black, etc. So I think we're, as a culture and as a people, we're, in my estimation, more open to so-called difference because
Mm.
there is no difference. because everybody in the neighborhood is speaking like you do. The same, hey,
Gotcha.
boy, good morning, right? Whatever it might be.
Right.
The popular music is similar, the jokes are the same, and the experiences of going to the beach or having a cookout or pilau or whatever is the same. But that is not the case for the majority of people who come into this country. And I think they're the ones who need to work on that. But in our families, no, in my own family, I'm going to tell you, Hindu, Christian, Pentecostal, United Church. Um, I think a young Jewish man just proposed to one of my nieces who's half Canadian, half Indian, Trini, and you know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's there. And I think a lot of our people, it's going to start happening. Varun, I don't know. What do you think in terms of that?
Well, I have a slightly different take as well. I agree with you that back home we have a more of a mix of cultures and peoples. But even still, I find that for the Indo-Caribbean families, they want you to stay within that Indo-Caribbean community. I
Oh,
feel that, you know, my aunts and uncles and relatives and grandparents growing up, they wanted you to marry a Guyanese. You know, I'm from Guyana. They want you to marry a Guyanese. They want you to marry an Indian, right? Um, so even coming here and you know, we grew up our lives over here. My nanny and my aji and my aja, you know, they had that strong hold and strong belief that Peter was mentioning of what India is and longing for that acceptance of, you know, being Indian.
right.
Um, and they want to hold on to it and they want to push it through the grandkids and stuff and say, hey, you guys, you know, marry a good Guyanese gal, or
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
um, in that sense, I honestly that's how we grew up, um, and there's nothing wrong with that. You know, forever, you know, for whatever reasons, whatever experiences that they had, whatever they went through in their times back home. Obviously, there was conflict and things like that as well amongst people. That shaped their mindset, right? But I
Right.
feel over here, um, you know, Canada's more of accepting. There's much more mixed cultures, a lot of inter interracial marriages,
Mhm.
and it's something that we've, you know, my generation, I feel, have accepted more openly, right? We're still gonna have my aunts and we're still gonna have my uncles that are always gonna be the diehard Guyana to the bone, right?
Yeah.
Or Trini to the bone, right? Um, but that's my experience and that's what I feel growing up, you know?
Gotcha. Gotcha. No, I feel that. And, I think that it's interesting. I think of the three of us, I'm the only one on the panel here who's not a father. So I'm super curious from you guys, right? As you have been raising your children, and even as you continue to do it, even as you evolve just as an individual, forget the title of father or anything else. How do you really, what's your thought process around what got to stay and what kind of got left behind when it comes to the things about our culture that you carry forward? I'm super curious about this.
Varun, you're more
Uh,
recent a dad than me. Let me
yeah,
hear.
so okay, I'm more recent. I have a 5-year-old boy and a 7-year-old girl. Um, Peter, like you mentioned, different heights, colors, shapes, and forms. Okay. My daughter is fairly tall. For her age, she's very skinny and tall, sort of like my build. And she has my complexion. It's a nice, a darker color.
Mhm.
My son is much lighter than me, right? He almost does not even, you know, I don't even know how his skin color is so clear.
Gotcha.
Well, where does that stem from? Well, I have to look at his mom's side as well. His On his mom's side, she's Guyanese. Her dad is from Berbice, Guyana, but her mom was born in India, Calcutta. However, she is Chinese looking, right? So
Okay.
almost Hakka, um, but cooked spicy, very
Hmm.
delicious foods. But she's very short. She's a very short. I don't even know if she's 5 feet anything. But very nice lady, and speaks Hindi, right? So,
Wow.
um, when she migrated to Canada with my partner's father, he was a Guyanese who seen a Chinese speaking Indian, and he said, "Oh my God, you are amazing!" And they got together and had their two kids, and so my partner, she looks almost Chinese, Guyanese, Indian, right? So there's already that blend and mix. Whereas my parents were both from Guyana. They're both Guyanese. Where I was born, my whole family was born in Guyana. So now I have kids that are born in Canadian, right? Um, and she's asking, what is my identity? Well, you are Canadian. That is true. You were
Right.
born in Toronto. But myself, as your father, being born in Guyana, well, we're Guyanese, and we have Indo-Caribbean heritage. And then, of course, on your grandmother's side, there's Indian as well. So we are this mix, and you know, you know, it's gonna change, right? It's gonna change as we continue growing up here. I don't know. Am I gonna stay in Barrie? Is Barrie gonna become more populated with more Indo-Caribbeans? Are they gonna come move up here? We
Right.
don't know. But that's my 5 and 7 year old experience. Peter, you have much older children and a longer history of experience, so go for it.
Well, I'm
Gotcha.
going to say my
Varun, would you
point
mind
exactly
seeing if
about.
there's a spot with some better internet for you? You're cutting out a little bit from our side, if that's all good with you.
Oh, sure. Give me a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, Peter, go ahead, man.
You sure? Okay. So first
Yeah.
of all, to Varun's point, it's my point exactly. We're more easily able to work with multicultural communities, I think, still. But I had to ask myself that question very, very, very much in terms of what I wanted for my children and what I hoped for. First of all, whether we like it or not, experience changes our perspective about life. And I did not get married in my 20s. And during my 20s, as I got older, saw some, relationships come together and come apart. And I wanted to be very careful about who I married, because when I became a teacher, and even before that, I understood that there are certain things. Children of divorced parents tend to become divorced. Children of smokers tend to become smokers. I wanted to be very careful. I am careful about my own. My attitude is my parents did sacrifice themselves for us to be here. In the word, in Alexander Hamilton, I ain't going to miss my shot, right?
Mhm.
And there are many shots all the time. So I always lived a certain way. I don't drink very much, hardly. I don't really smoke. I like good food. I try to exercise. I do a bunch of stuff. And therefore, I needed a partner who would have the same outlook in life of me and as me. And while I did date some Jamaican women, some Guyanese women, et cetera, and other people, I didn't really find the combination that I was looking for. And in the end, I actually ended up marrying a Punjabi woman from India. Not from India, born in Montreal. She actually told her parents, we're more like each other than we are to our own families,
Right.
because of the particular experiences we had in growing up in Toronto and all that, which made a lot of sense to me. But the main thing for me was I did not want my children to go through what I went through. And, my name is Peter Deberan. So to many people, if you don't see my face, you think you're dealing with a white guy. And then when you walk into a room, you have more actual experience in dealing with racism, because you see their faces and you see their excuses and you see them say, I'm so sorry that job is taken, which has happened to me on more than one occasion, at least 3 occasions.
Right.
But certainly you walk into a room as Peter Deberan and people are expecting you to be a certain background, and you see it in their faces, the discomfort initial. So I tried to name my children names that would more true to them, their culture, but would be easy to pronounce. It still didn't quite work. Sahil has been called Sahil, Sohail, Saul, Anika, 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 whatever. And Jaya, but Jaya, easier, but nonetheless differences. But the main thing for me was I had to ask myself, what kind of father could I be? And what is it that I bring as a Trini to my family? And I genuinely felt what Trinis bring from a positive level is I feel a sense of humor, a great ability to chat with different people and be open. Music, musicality, those kinds of things. And the Indian part of it, and maybe true of all, but a genuine reverence for our families and for our foreparents. And I've tried my hardest to bring it. My wife is quite different. First of all, I'm in the creative side, English major, Southeast Asian Studies major, teaching degree, etc. Trained in a form of dance, which was modern dance, not Hindu dancing or Indian dancing, and has a different sense. And my wife in biochemistry and science and all that stuff. So it's been an interesting experience with the two, and I've tried hard with my children, but it is hard because first of all, we were not in Scarborough, we were in Toronto's West End, among all the Ukrainians and Poles and other people in the 90s and 80s.
Right.
A little different now. And now that I'm in Thornhill, which is just north of Toronto, and we're here because her family has been here since the 70s. And there's hardly anybody who are West Indians here, far less Indo-Caribbean people. So the struggle continues. And all I can do with my children is I try to be very intentional. Me coming and finding people like Varun and yourself and all of this is another route for me, and working with the Vedic Cultural Center and this particular thing with the CCICC. Sick. I just wanted to say it that way. Forgive me. But anyway, CCICC is another way for me, as I am in the last quarter of my life, to say to myself, what legacy can I bring to my children? How can they see the richness of our culture? How can they So Canada is about hierarchies, and Canada values certain kinds of accents, certain kinds of names, certain kinds of looks. And while whiteness is still there, they're at least 80% or 90% white in this country. And while there's, a deference to being it was Indians, then it was natives, it was Aboriginal, now it's, so our First Nations or, those kinds of things. But there's also blackness. There's a recognition of blackness in this country, whether people want to admit it. Number one, there's a certain sense of guilt that they didn't come here on their own, they were dragged here. And that is fear. Two, there was genuine slavery and over almost 400 years of it, and they were treated like animals. And that is fear to accept and respect. But at the same time, there's also a difference in that when we look at Black people today too, there's also a sense of coolness, right? There's the basketball players and the football players and the musicians and the jazz players and all this kind of stuff. So there's a sense of acknowledgement to that and other kinds of cultures. There's none with regard to us. There is none. And I'm going to go hard on that. I don't care what other people are going to say. Oh God, we have culture, but not in a way that we're respected by the wider society, Black to white, white to Black. And I think we do need to have that conversation with each other so people recognize and understand, what do we bring? I'm going to say it right out. Of course, we bring creativity and collaboration, and we bring our intelligence. We've got you guys working what you do. I worked for other people's children for 28 years, and I did a damn good job. But at the end of the day, that's as Peter the individual, because they don't, I'm still representing our people, because most of the time they've never met any of the Caribbean people. And in a certain form of leadership. But the question for us still is, how do we find a footing in this country where we're known as something more than just, amen, oh, I like your roti.
Yeah. And
Right.
I think, a big part of that is, and I'm seeing more of us do this, as a people, is like we're actually feeling okay with taking up space in spaces, right? We're not really minimizing things, we're proudly, speaking more the way we actually speak, wearing our colors, having our events, hosting spaces unapologetically in our own way. I do see that seems to be a bit more of the energy that I'm seeing in the last, say, year or two. Where I think we're really owning it more than ever. And I think that's where, CCICC really is yet again wonderful, because it allows more of us to have that platform to own more of who we are, right? Whether we're talking about, say, the Cultural Heritage event coming up May 23rd, right? Or we're talking about the way that we're giving each other permission to write and actually express our voices, right? We're actually saying, no, we belong. And we're not waiting for other people.
After COVID. Something happened after COVID, and I don't know what the heck it is in terms of me and you guys too. Maybe I really began to think, and maybe a lot of our people began to think of every age. The same thing, I agree with you. I feel there's a different energy that's been taking place over the last 2-3 years. And I'm just thrilled that we can be part of that wave as well, and offer something to our community and to the wider
Yeah,
community as well.
for
That's
sure.
valuable. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I know that as with anything where you grow, right, there's growing pains along with it, right? And so, like, I know that what's being built here with the CCICC, right, it's not necessarily entirely a brand new concept, right? In its own way, it's kind of been brewing in the background, and now it's more of a formalized thing, right? So, I'm curious because you guys have been the ones who are in the rooms that a lot of us on the rest of the team maybe aren't standing in, right? You are the ones who are maybe coming face to face with some of our elders, right? And really, understanding their thoughts around, how we're trying to bring change to our community and the way we do things and the way we think about things, right? So how have you guys been able to, I can understand this is probably a very delicate, ballet kind of performance you almost have to do, but how do you go about successfully acknowledging the contributions that they've made while at the same time saying, hey, you know what? Thank you for bringing us here. I got it from here. I'm going to grab the torch and I'm taking it from this point on. How are you able to gracefully do that? Because I think that that's often missing when it comes to the feelings of appreciation when we think about generation to generation, right? Say the older generation might just hear the younger generation complaining about, oh, you guys with this and that, the other, but they're not getting the thank yous, right? So I want it to be an opportunity for some flowers and, you know what I mean? So,
Well, Josh, if that's $1 million question, because if we had the right answer in a perfect world, it would be very seamless and an easy transition to carry a torch forward. In the reality of it, change is hard. Our seniors still feel they're the smartest ones in the rooms. And by all means, experience, of course, they have the most experience. They've gone through things that, we haven't, and can speak to those things. So I appreciate that from them. However, in terms of, well, why did you bring me here to Canada? You wanted to educate me. You wanted me to learn. You wanted me to research. You wanted me to ask my own questions, find my own answers. Well, you weren't afforded that opportunity. You were busy hustling, bustling, trying to make ends meet. You came to this country. You may have been somebody back home, but over here, you're starting from ground zero, right?
right.
You have to earn that respect. And again, it's times like when Peter came in the 70s and 80s. I mean, for my parents, we came in the 90s. So times were maybe a little bit easier or different for when we stepped in as opposed to when some of the other families were here much longer than I have been. But even still, I see that our seniors, they have that. I don't know the right word to say it, because I don't want to say anything offensive to my seniors. I love them and respect them very much, but there's something when it comes to change, it's just hard, even in the workplace, just in general. You know what I mean? When there's a new system or something being rolled out, I like this way. I know how to do this. Let's do it this way, right? There's always resistance to change. Let me just leave it at that. Peter, do you have something to add? Certainly you do. I know.
I think. Oh my God! Whoa, easy now. What I'm going to say, what makes our situation decidedly different is we are working to rebuild, to revitalize, to enhance upon something that's been done already for decades. But at the same time, it doesn't belong to anyone in particular. The idea of an Indian Arrival Day, for example, has been practiced in many Hindu and other kinds of Indo-Caribbean temples, and certainly across the Caribbean where there are Indians. So no one owns the concept. Certainly there might have been people who got together in a particular locale and did it their way. But if they did, and in this particular case, let's say the particular Vedic Cultural Center in Markham, Ontario, if they did, then they did it a particular way, which does not negate the contribution, the positive contribution of other people coming in and say, hey, we can also add to this. We can also build capacity. We can also add more things. For example, 20 years ago, and I knew the person, a guy by the name of Ram Jagesa, who sort of started in Trinidad and helped bring it over here as well too. And they would have had an Indian arrival day, and they would have had the usual stuff, the tassa and the chutney, and people would have talked about our trip to India and what happened in indentureship. But that does not necessarily need to be the only thing that happens in 2026 or moving forward, right? I mean, now we have an opportunity to get onto a YouTube channel to create our own versions of that in terms of what happened. We can do different interpretations of where we want to be. We can use reels and interviews and talk to people and see things for ourselves in a way that it couldn't happen before. But the other part too is our people have changed. I know that sounds weird. I'm the oldest one among you, but I see, first of all, I did not grow up in a Hindu world. I studied Hinduism from U of T and understand it very well, and I've read all the books on my own, all the way through to the Vedas. And I'm going to tell you the Rig Veda, if you've never read it, is deep. But I'm a philosophy kind of major too, comparative religion and all that. So I'm not biased in terms of Hinduism. I wanted to know which way to go in my life. So I took it upon myself to read the Buddhism and Sikhism and all this kind of stuff. All of that said, I think while I do consider myself somebody who adheres to Hinduism, I also recognize that I see the world differently. I'm not that particular group of people who were only Hindus from Guyana. First of all, I'm from Trinidad, just as Indian, just as Indo-Caribbean, same blood in all of us. So people need to recognize our differences. And the second part, from the 80s and 90s and whatever onward, we have people who are not married to each other. We have people who are not going to have children. We have people who in 5 or 10 years, their closest relationship might be with AI or a robot. We have people who do not necessarily adhere to one gender. These are the realities of our people and all people. So for somebody to sit around saying, well, this is the way we did it. Okay, I know that's the way you did it, but we're here now. And if we're genuine, if you are genuine about reaching your people and engaging your people, and us coming together as a people and really discussing the truth of our lives, then we need to behave differently and be open to the reality that's going to come our way. So, for example, Varun and I and you, maybe they may think we're the challenge, but the truth is when we are opening our ears to see what's going to come before us and what's out there, there's going to be a lot of challenges, but this is the growth. I will say this, because we may never get to it. In some ways, while we went through hell, and I'm going to say it very clearly, every academic out there, non-Indo-Caribbean, has also said that the experience of indenture was very closely related to what the African slaves experienced. Although I'm going to say it's for a shorter period of time, et cetera, et cetera. But all of that said, we went through hell, all of us together in the Caribbean. We were traumatized. There is alcoholism. There is spousal abuse. There's all sorts of crap going on. And we need to be open to that. We can't dream of a wonderful India. Always. We're here. So that's the other part. And I think if we want to be meaningful to people's lives, we can't just do chutney. We've got to be willing to come together and have discussions, and we got to be willing to say, where are we going in the future as a people? Because I can guarantee anyone who's going to listen to this, other communities in this country are having those conversations and are making sure that they can move in a way that they can uplift one another and not drag each other down.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that really speaks to something that we, the three of us have really, spoken quite a bit about, right? Which is leadership, right? And the way that we see that as being one of the main pillars of how we're trying to really, model and embody a shift in how we show up, not only leading ourselves, but, for our community and things like that. And I think that that's where, some of the resistance comes in, right? Once again, for me, when I've experienced this type of resistance from, say, the older community, when we're trying to, introduce a new way of thinking or doing, it's usually because they're just like, you're just erasing everything I just did, right? They're not seeing it as like, I get to build this because you built that. So thank you for building that so I could build this. You know what I mean? So, I think that what's coming through a lot is, maybe there's been a lot of finger pointing that we've all experienced, right? Where there's maybe a bit of a lack of accountability for the role we've played in that, right? So maybe it's on us to maybe look at how we're communicating this respectful transition, if you will, right? When we are trying to come into these spaces. Because at the end of the day, I think we are all acknowledging the different traumas and things that, our community has gone through. And some of us, depending on the role we get to play in this lifetime, we might come up and be on the other side of it to get to witness it almost as an observer, right? Or we might be the one trapped by that kind of thinking. So, this, I think, really leads nicely into our next question here, right? Which is around what patterns or behaviors do you guys see that are still showing up today, right? That are really echoes of our history and an unhealed people, right? And what do we need to do to consciously break that? And I want to start off because I've shared one with you guys, and you guys seem to really resonate. And I could tell through the laughter, right? Not so much.
I love that question. That is a heavy question. I want
Right?
you guys to talk first while I figure out.
Yeah. So,
That's
for
a heavy
me,
one.
one that I often see is that, we might have folks within our community who ascend to positions of leadership. And to me, I've seen quite a few who I would say are kind of reincarnates of Jim Jones and what he did to the people in Guyana, right? So in terms of how it's like, it's this guise of I'm trying to show you a new way and follow me, like I've got it, don't worry, I've got our people. And then it's really just leading you off a cliff in a certain way. You know what I mean? So I see that cycle happening, and I see it really driven by a lot of a sense of, it could be tied in a very sick way almost, right? To our sense of not enoughness, right? Which gets reinforced and, perpetrated against our people, right? And then we go out and we do things that further amplify the different harms that happen, right? So that's kind of one example that I've seen. We almost, as a way of coping with a situation or that power or whatever, we kind of tend to go in a unhealthy way with it. That kind of reminds me of the Jim Jones of the past. So that's kind of one that I've noticed. How about you guys?
I feel one that comes right off the top of my head is just stubbornness, right? I feel like some of our seniors and our elders are just stubborn in, their ways of thinking, their ways of seeing in this tunnel vision, and just can't escape the box. And it's very challenging and difficult to have a very kind conversation to show them a different path, to show them a different opportunity, to show them there's more than one way to do things, right? It's not, this is how we've done it, this is how it needs to continue to be done. And trying to convey that is a challenge. So, we as leaders for today generations, myself, you, Peter, being a few years older than us, we have to find a way to convey that message. And it's tricky, right? Because there are some of our seniors who are more academically inclined and understand and can get out of the box, but not too much outside of that box, right? And then there's those that are, I know best, listen to me and do as I say. And that's, those kind of seniors and things, as much as I may try to convey a different message, it may not resonate with them. And that's something that we would have to accept. As leaders, we'd have to recognize and understand there's only so much that you can do and say. And anything beyond that, there's not much we can do. That's how I feel.
I hear that. Sometimes, being younger, it can be difficult because we might have the right and most timely message, right? But we could be the wrong messenger simply by optics of not having enough gray hair or enough wrinkles, right? To sort of back up what that wisdom was,
Or to see you growing up as a child. They see you in the lens of you're a child, right? And as they grow, you're still a child. And even if you're with a family, you're still a child. And even though you have a career, you're still a child. And they have that motherly, fatherly instinct, so to
Right.
say, right? They always have the good intentions. They feel that they want to protect us. They feel that, hey, we think what you're doing might be risky or harmful to us or our community.
Mhm.
So there's fear, right? And it's hard to come over to overcome that and get around that. So as leaders, we have to figure that out. And one day at a time, we'll get there.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Varun. Appreciate that.
I'm going to say that we're all leaders, and for myself, every day I'm trying to be open to new things, try to find greater meaning in something, try to realize something. There is just because somebody's old or they have a position does not make them a leader. It just meant they got older. I used to make a joke with my students when I was a classroom teacher that don't be upset with many adults. They're that way because their dreams, 90% of their dreams didn't come true.
Oh, man.
You have many dreams when you're 19. You have some dreams when you're 29. By the time you're 39, that narrows. And then some of these people, they don't know anything else. Now, I want to be a leader and I'm old and you have to listen to me. And, at the end of the day, that's not what makes a leader. And I don't consider myself a leader in that way. I think, first of all, for myself, I bring a certain set of experiences and a certain set of openness. And I want genuinely to grow our people. And what I can learn from a 12-year-old, I can learn from a 19-year-old, I can learn from anybody. But you got to show me that we're all on the same page, right? Then not a problem. For example, I was making a joke with Varun earlier before getting on this thing. I said, hey, have some stuff ready because if you need to present, the reason is, in my world, as I moved up only so far because of my particular set of circumstances in a place that said they knew all about DEI and equity, I made sure other people, by virtue of their racial and gender representation, moved past me. And in the end, still made sure I had the toughest schools and I handled it. But then it was time to walk away. What I'm trying to say is, I'm a leader only in that I'm able to genuinely listen to human beings, work with them with mutual respect, and have people feel they're heard, and together we find a solution based on the circumstances we find ourselves in. I'm not a leader because I'm older than you guys, right? We're not working together because I'm older. We're working together because we've found a way to connect with each other as human beings. And there are people lots of younger who might be 18 or 19 years old or whatever in our organization or older, and I'm thrilled to work with them if we find that we have the same goals in mind. So for me, on one level, I'm going to say to Varun, there is some merit to their feeling they're losing something, but reality, I don't expect to last forever. I don't know if I'm going to be here 5 years from now or 25 years from now. All I know is I have right now to try and make good things happen for our people. And here's the selfish part, for my children. Because I feel in my heart, if I don't do it, if I don't bring what I bring, who's going to do it? I've been waiting 40 years for my people to do it. I'm not joking. Varun, you talk about the elders. Well, they were concerned Guyanese, but what exactly are they concerned about and what did they do? And I don't mean this as an insult. Right. There was OSIC, Ontario Society for the whatever of Indo-Caribbean. We have had many organizations over 30 and 40 years. Where is the legacy? What is it that they left behind? How has Canadian society changed because of their efforts? So I know I bring certain skills. I led schools for this particular, I know what I can do through fire, right? And what I'm bringing and what I know you guys are bringing and other people who want to join us, and this is a full invitation to anyone, is we are bringing a presence, we're bringing a legacy, we're demonstrating not only to our people, but to other people what we came through and where we're going. And we're asking people for the first time ever, including our own people, to really look with new eyes at the richness of what our people were and what they brought with them, but as well to use those new eyes and that genius to interact with other human beings of different backgrounds to make this world better. You don't need to be Hindu or Christian or whatever. That is the way I've lived, right? Why else what am I doing as a father? I can't just say, well, you children are going to respect me because I'm your daddy or because I was your teacher. I got to stand up like a man. So I'm going to say on one level, while we're in this world of the 2000s, my headspace is in the 1800s and 90s, because these are the books I had fun reading. When I'm going to just speak to men, when men's word meant something, where we spoke about honor and integrity, right? I still very much believe in that. And the second part is, what are we fighting for? We've got a world that's falling apart all around us. We can't just be talking about marry you. We got to think bigger. And so we're asking people as a community, how are we interact? What is our engagement with the rest of Canada as a group of people? Yeah. So to me, leadership is, what are we going to do?
Yeah. And, I think it's really important that, people understand, what leadership means to the people who are leading an organization, right? And you guys are very much at the forefront of CCICC and everything that it stands for, right? So I think that one of the best things we can possibly do for our audience and anyone who's even considering, working with the organization is for them to have insight into how you guys do think about things, right? Because that is one of the key differentiators as I've seen it, having worked with a lot of different Indo-Caribbean organizations and things like that. You guys are definitely, you are drawing a firm stance when it comes to how you lead, right? And I appreciate that you guys have used all the different experiences, good and other, of the leadership you've endured in order to understand how you want to move forward. But I think that one of the best things that we can do is modeling for our community as well, right? Some of these behaviors that we're encouraging. So I think we have really shed light on some of the things that we don't like about, say, some of the leadership that we have encountered so far in different settings, right? So if we were to say what leadership means to us, right, moving forward as a collective, as a people, as individual, as men, right? What do we see that as, right? Like, how do you guys define that? Because I think that that's really going to help people to connect more deeply with us and the cause that we're serving here.
You go ahead, Peter. You start.
So, I'm going to say in the course of my career, obviously, there's been training and education in the concept of what leadership is. When a principal or a vice principal leads a school, they're trying to help kids want to learn, want to get along with each other, want to have respect for each other, no matter what their differences are. They're also dealing with parents who are fighting in the parking lot over a parking space or demanding that they should park in the bus lane because I need to be here now. They're also dealing with society as a whole because of the media scrutiny. Apparently, everything must be fixed through the public school system. And of course, through the superintendents and the directors of education and the province. And we can see what's happening in this country, or more importantly, in this particular province, where educational directors have been removed from their positions and new business people are going to take over. Because apparently, and here's leadership to me, I didn't know that children were products. I didn't know that there were little, screws to be whatever, or parts of car tires, or toys to be sold on the mass market. These are human beings. And yet it's a business model. It should never have been a business model. It should be an NGO model. This is human-centered. We're investing in our own society, in our own humanity. And yet we're facing successive periods of what I call, as we move over to more right-wing thinking across this country over the last decade, of people who've forgotten what it is to love children, love learning for learning's sake, and treat each other with genuine humanity, as opposed to, I should be respectful to Indigenous and Black folks and LGBTQ because they told me to. No, how about who I've got in front of me? So what is leadership to me? Leadership is not me sitting around on my butt telling other people to do stuff. That's not what leadership is. Leadership is genuinely listening to people, understanding what the needs are genuinely, and as I said before, working with them to find a solution that can be satisfactory to all. It's not easy. Leadership is hard work. Leadership is service. But again, based on maybe Sir Thomas More and Hinduism and a whole bunch of other things. I believe in something called the common good or the common. What is our role as Hindus, if I may? Right? This is what I understood. The point is, I'm in the world for a reason. And what is the meaning that I'm going to give to my life? Is it just going to be money? Or is it going to be position? Oh, crap, look at the jewelry I got. No, it is going to be what am I doing in the world that brings meaning? And how do I make the world better around me? I want my children to genuinely love me, not love me because I have the daddy. And this is true of everyone we're going to meet. I'm going to tell you, it's been hard work coming back finally to find the group and creating CCICC, but finding gentlemen like you, and in particular because Varun and I have been working very closely for a year and a half. We've been speaking almost daily during that time. So to find people who you can connect with, we're not related, weren't born in the same eras, we're not from the same countries necessarily, but to know and feel that there is a reason we're doing something, that there's a good. And if another form of leadership for me is, can I be to try and be as effective as I can to articulate that vision, to articulate the values that we stand for, and create the mechanism where we can achieve that goal. Now, I'm not pretending that somehow or another we're going to be better than other groups. I don't know what will happen 2 and 4 and 8 years from now. But all we can do is to strive fully to create an organization that everyone will feel welcome, that everyone will feel that the program we do are meaningful to their lives now. That will mean something maybe to their grandparents or their grandchildren. And that's what we're trying for. Is it leadership or is it just, I am driven to make these things happen? Right?
Well, I think for me, like that is leadership, right? Because you're thinking about, what is the impact of every decision that I'm making, right? And I think that the way that I've seen you lead this, this team so far, I love the way that you do it because you're not micromanaging. If anything, you're actually encouraging other people to see just how effectively they can lead themselves. And to me, being a big proponent of self-mastery, right? Making sure that you're leading yourself effectively before you turn your sights on leading anyone else. Right. I truly do see the two of you embody that kind of ethos, right? Understanding that, if you're not something worth following or, following the example of, why would anyone want to follow you? So I see that intention in the way that you guys do show up. And I think that really does set you apart and makes a huge difference, as everyone's working with you, because we really do feel like it's a safe space where we can communicate thoughts and ideas and perhaps introduce something that didn't come out of your mouth. Right. And that to me is where the gold is. So I think that's a testament to how you guys have chosen to lead this organization. So I thank you for that. And, Varun, I'd love to hear your thoughts around leadership, man.
Yeah, so this is why I feel Peter and I complement one another. He's an intellectual, very clear spoken, has very structured goals and guidelines, and that's because of his being in the TDSB and being in that school system and knowing that structure is important and matters. I'm more lighthearted. For me, leadership is about engaging others, right? I don't want others to feel that, they're shy. Some of our friends are shy. They may feel intimidated being under a structure of that order, right? So I try to be lighthearted. I try to be comedic in some ways. I like to, have fun. And I think people, at least my generation and younger, and even some of the seniors, they appreciate that little sense of humor. But at the end of the day, it's they understand that there's still business that needs to be done. And when I say I want to do something and lead something properly, I do it with my best ability. And here's my son. Hi, Serge. Hi, Jordan. So yeah, I mean, being able to just being able to, be lighthearted. Obviously, you have kids who wants to turn off the lights on me in the middle of my meeting.
Beautiful.
You have to you have to juggle and meet people at different boundaries, right? Some people, I want to connect to those that may not be able to connect to something that's more serious, right? I want to be able to reach others, that they're comfortable to come talk to me. I have the, I treat it as a, door open policy, come, let's have a conversation. What are the issues and how could we collectively work together to resolve them?
Got you.
I do
And
want to
I think
say,
that
if
yeah,
you don't mind, I think we're all very lucky to have Varun as chair of this organization. Despite the fact that he says he's lighthearted, he in some ways is harder than me, which makes it great because he will say, "Look, man, we're going ahead, and this is what we're going to do." He's an excellent writer, excellent ability to reach out to people when after 3 or 4 times trying to get them to just give me a straight answer. Are you in or can you tell me?
right.
You told me last week you wanted to do it. Do you really? And then he'll find a way to make that connection where sometimes I can't and vice versa. So we've been very lucky that way. And to your point in that, again, for myself, the idea is not to create an organization where I'm at the top and I run this. The idea for me is we want to create an organization that can continue to grow, that continue to attract talent, that can continue to attract different kinds of visions and perspective, because that is, to me, a form of longevity. It's my hope that maybe 5 years from now, where maybe I don't necessarily hold this position, but I can attend a function by it, and you guys might be there and feel proud and feel that my children can know they can go to this place and they find other kids like themselves who might be half Indo-Caribbean, half Indo-Trini,
Right.
who might be of different lifestyles and still feel this is a space that's open for them. I'm just going to
Right.
add this as well. Where our people were very, very lucky, and we need to see ourselves in some ways as being richer in culture than other people. When we left the country that was known as India, then South Asia today, and even though we couldn't go back because we lost, if we could go back, the woman from a male point of view or whatever, parents might have died, people moved, dislocated. Somebody wanted to marry, was married. People don't recognize you. You lost your identity in terms of caste and location, etc. But what we found in Trinidad was a freedom out of that. We were able somehow to intermarry. We were able to find, in some ways, to create a new form of living, a new language, a new rhythm. Rolling the tassa is different from rolling the tassa in India overall. The rotis that people talk about, or roti wrap, didn't happen in India. It happened on the plantation, right? So we were free as well, not only to create that identity that was unique in there, but also to take on other forms of culture to make the people of Guyana, the people of Trinidad or Jamaica unique and still inform it. As I often tell people, where did you get the curry in the curried goat? And if it's curried goat and rice, who brought the rice? And for that matter, who brought the ganja, right? We contributed, we continue to, and we're contributing here. I think other people are bringing the ganja now, but I'm just saying, right? And so I think there's an incredible freedom that we need to see that we can give to each other now and continue to grow and create. We're not stuck by saying, I'm only from here, or this is what our family does.
Yeah. And one of the ways that I see that the organization is really trying to actually push forward is actually when we were talking about, what is our first cover of this sort of relaunch going to look like, right? And that was an interesting exercise, right? Because I know that we ran through images that in a way were, if we were to give it an overall theme, I would say that it was more honoring the past and where we have been versus where it is that we are and where we want to go. Right. So I think that it was very interesting. That was a testament to me also of, the organization, right? Because we are acknowledging, but we're looking ahead too. And that's one of the key differentiators that I find with, the things that we're wanting to write about and the events that we're trying to have, right? It really does stand out from what I've seen. So I want to ask you both a very direct question that I want you to answer boldly and very proudly, right?
Here we
If
go.
someone is
This is it.
I'm sure that our audience has probably seen that we have come out with a new Instagram and, we're really present out there, right? So you might be thinking, okay, well, oh my goodness, another Indo-Caribbean organization going on. Okay, I don't want to follow all of that. what is the pitch that you guys could make to somebody if they're thinking about, oh, you know what, this is just going to be another one of something I've already seen? Why is it not going to be that way?
Well, I could say from my perspective, being in my mid-30s, a young family, living in Toronto, Canada, growing up here, and now raising a family here, um, it brings me back to identity, right? Who are we as a people? Who are my kids as people? And as I mentioned a couple times already, my daughter is born here, my son is born here, so they are Canadian. So you know what? Let me go ahead and tell you. What is CCICC? Well, it is the Canadian Caribbean Indian Cultural Collective.
Say what?
Canadian.
Say that again, bro. Say that.
Well, we're Canadian being because, my children are born here Canadian, and I'm sure as many other families, young families, are born in the Western world. But we're also Caribbean. I'm Guyanese. I have family and cousins that are born in Trinidad, Jamaica, and other parts of the islands. And then, of course, our ancestors are from India. And so, together we are the cultural collective. So we are Canadian, we're Caribbean, and we're Indian, and together the cultural collective. So that's where we come up with the CCICC.
Gotcha. And collective, was there, like, what does collective mean to you? Because I've seen different, organizations give themselves, say, association or organization. Why was collective the one that really resonated the most with this group?
I want people to look it up right now. There's something called the Art Gallery of Ontario that exists here in Canada. It was very big, and about 2 or 3 years ago, they did an exhibition called Island to Island, British Art in the Caribbean. I attended that. I was very curious. I wanted to see what was going on. And throughout the exhibition, there was no mention of the Indo-Caribbean and no actual, which I thought was interesting because it was the 1950s onward, and India was called the jewel in the crown. And India made so many countries rich for hundreds of years, not only giving them sugar, right? But silk, cotton, tea, salt, curry, labor, jewelry, things that didn't, you know what I mean? It brought that country up left and right. And
Right.
I'm going to say, so we go to this exhibition and there's a picture of Sam Salvan, but there's no acknowledgement of Sam Salvan as an Indian man in the context of it. There's an art piece that shows definitely an Indian nanny or an older Indian woman from the back with her hair braided in a way that our grandmothers or other people did. That's clearly an Indian woman. And there
Right.
was an artist by the last name Kempadu. But throughout the whole exhibition, no acceptance of this so-called Windrush organization or people who went there being who we were, right? So for my part, it's great that we have different Indo-Caribbean organizations and they all play an important role, I think.
Mhm.
But someone has to play a role where we need to be able to be forward-facing with the Canadian narrative of what multiculturalism is and not be willing to accept that only certain people are here and other people don't count. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I wrote a letter to them. And we ended up writing a couple of letters to them because I ended up working with other Indo-Caribbean educators to try and get something happening.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, what we were told by an intermediary that they helped choose for us, they said, these people do not think you people have culture. That is what he said.
Right.
Right? In other words, we're going to do an exhibition, but we don't need to acknowledge Indo-Caribbean people or in that way. We can acknowledge Black folk. We can acknowledge other people.
Gotcha.
We can have the ROM, something that I was part of 2.5 decades ago. I was on a committee to create the South Asian Gallery there. And when you look at what they're doing, it is Islamic art or Sikh art or whatever. So our people really need to ask ourselves questions in that, how are we contributing really to the cultural aspects of this country? Because everybody's coming to become lawyers and doctors and accountants. God knows we have a lot of it, but these are service. whether we want to admit it or not.
Right.
Where's the creative part? Where's the part that we're saying, I'm bringing my identity to this artwork? So for me, CCICC is a forum whereby we can begin to nurture those aspects of ourselves while we were teachers. One of my sisters is an accountant. My wife is a dentist. All this, we got that. But I started off as somebody who danced and choreographed and was an actor for a while and did a television show and things like that. And that we contribute, and we have more Indo-Caribbean people in those arts, and we need to do it. So when you talk about the word collective, we are attempting to be genuinely grassroots. This is not top down. It's not saying we have all the answers. No, a young person right now, because you're seeing it on TikTok, you're seeing stuff out of India, South India, where these girls are dancing to sort of other kinds of beats using Indian dance patterns. And it's really cool. We have people. Drake can't be the only one who's half Jewish and half Jamaican or whatever he is to do hip hop and rap. Our people should be able to do that too. Spoken word, jazz music, jazz dance. It is not the purview of somebody else. And in fact, we have seen it in other cultures where, let's say, Japanese people or Chinese people or Jewish people are playing the violin and doing all the symphonies, but these were not their original cultures either. So I think there's an opportunity for our people to contribute to it. Doesn't make me less Indo-Caribbean because I learned French.
Right.
Or I like the opera. I do. Right? It doesn't, I'm still, and I learned this by this part by saying, I do remember in the 90s at U of T meeting a bunch of folks and this guy saying, where are you from? Well, I'm Trinidadian. But you don't act Trinidadian? I don't have to. We shouldn't have to act anything.
Yeah.
Right? I'm me. I don't need to speak a particular way to say that I'm just as much Indo-Caribbean or just as much Trini as anybody else, whoever those people are. And I do the usual throwdown. We can always have a dance contest. I'm ready to go.
Right. Well, you know what, guys, I think that we've really done a good job at helping people to connect with a little bit of the mindset of the people who are part of this organization already. And I think we've really gotten their minds open to the idea that this is actually going to be something a little bit different than what they have seen before. So I think one way that we can really give them the cherry on top for our episode today is to let the people know, what do we have in the pipeline? How can they get connected? Where are they going to expect to find us? And, CCICC, what do we envision for the rest of 2026, right? Because I know that people are just clamoring to see what's going on. I know the buzz is really built around our May 23rd event. So, how about you guys just give that to the people and let them know how to connect, what to look forward to, all that kind of good stuff.
Go for it, Varun.
Absolutely. So, to even go back a little bit, the Vedic Cultural Center in Markham, Ontario, right at Kennedy and 14th Avenue, beside the nice tall water tower, they've been putting on this amazing annual Indian Arrival Day program each May for 27 years. It began in 1999, and I myself, growing up as a child, was part of that exhibition. Whether I performed, played tabla, part of the fashion show, involved in the skits, the whole jazz. And now, as I've come to be an adult myself, I stepped away from the organization, completed my studies, had a family, carried on with my life, and now I was given the call in 2022 by my father and some of the seniors, and said, look, we're all 70 plus. We don't have the same energy and the capacity even to carry on this program much longer. We would love to get yourself involved and like-minded individuals. So myself and Nadia were members of the Mandir. I've known Nadia since I was about 7 or 8 years old. And we took it upon ourselves to, how do we engage our youth? In 2023's program, so for 2022, we came out to plan the 2023, 24, 25, and now the 26 program. Essentially, we want to bring the younger generations back together. So there was a push on our end to figure that out. And in the last year and a half or so, as Peter mentioned earlier, we've worked very closely on bridging that gap. And one of the ways we realize is I involve my younger cousin, who's about 10 years younger than I am, and he's into fitness, right? He's like, oh man, how do I help my people? I don't know if I can help out with the heritage stuff, but fitness, what can I do? Well, he said, what about a walkathon? Let's do a run and walkathon. That's
Right.
something I can get behind. That's something that I know. That's something our people need. We need to exercise. We need to promote healthy living. We need to be outside and in the outdoors and get away from being cooped up. We don't want the kids behind the screens. We don't want them, locked indoors. We want them outside and engaged. So he initiated the first inaugural 5K run and walkathon last year. He brought in 130 participants. He raised
Wow.
$2,004, and he organized it within a month. And this year he's built a bigger team. He's had the leadership of Peter and I. He's had the support of like-minded individuals. We're aiming for 200 participants Sunday, May 3rd, not this weekend, the following weekend, right out of the Vedic Cultural Center. Registration opens at 12 noon. We have multiple local vendors, community supporters who are going to be out there. Come on out, support them, see what they're doing. They're like-minded individuals like us doing great things in the community. We have opening remarks by myself and Peter and Sanjay, who's leading that initiative.
Sorry to interrupt. Do you want to give them the handle or give them something where they could look it up if they want to check it out?
Oh yeah, the Instagram handle, and Josh, absolutely feel free to share it afterwards as well.
Yep.
Run for Heritage. Run for Heritage. And then our handle is at the CCICC. The CCICC. Of course, there's our website as well, the CCICC.org, that has more information on the run as well. And we're aiming to raise 4,500. We're about 60% there, and are confident that we're going to surpass that. And then, of course, this is all to raise funds for the actual Indian Arrival Day Heritage Program.
But before we do that, I want to interrupt you. I want to say that, there is no leadership from me at all. I simply support Sanjay Kumar is the guy who is doing it. He's done a terrific job. He's again, identified people in the community doing an incredible job of doing what he's doing. So as Varun has said, he's actually surpassed already before the run even has started the original finances that we were able to collect for the program. So kudos to him. And we hope we see, for those people who are able to watch this podcast, we hope to see some of you guys out there.
Yeah, so as I said, registration opens at 12 noon, Sunday, May 3rd at the Veda Cultural Center, 4345 14th Avenue in Markham, Ontario. It's going to be a fun day. We have a volunteer leading our stretches at 12:45. There'll be a group exercise. Have everybody lined up with a shotgun start at 1 o'clock. Upon the completion, we're hoping everybody is back by 2:30, 3 o'clock. We do have a live DJ, See the DJ, super cool girl, very popular in our community, will be leading the efforts for us to have some fun afterwards. We have possibly some ice cream vendor on site that will be giving out some ice creams. Every participant is going to be receiving a nice metal finish as well as a token goodie bag to take away with you. And then, of course, as I said, it's all in support of the larger South Asian Heritage event on Saturday, May 23rd. It begins at 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. The lower hall exhibit opens to the public. We'll have several vendors out there as well. Displays of cultural artifacts, a logi, a chula, which is a fireside. We have a mock ship, some utensils, kitchen utensils, some cool items, and it'll be a lot of fun. And we'll also be launching our magazine, our rebranded magazine, which Josh, you're a writer in it. Thank you for your contributions. And I'm hoping everybody gets their copy. It's going to be digital as well. That will be launched at 5 p.m. at the Lower Hall exhibit. And Josh, you're giving us a treat by joining us this year. So we're very much looking forward to having you. And then, of course, we have an upper hall stage program. We have a beautiful stage upstairs at the Vedic Cultural Center. Seating capacity is up to 450 to 500, and we hope to fill that up. And it will be led by none other than Auntie Shoba or Sandy, STCC Dance Academy award winning writer, a lot of accolades behind her name. Very, very nice, humble individual helping us lead that performance. And we look forward to having everybody there.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. Anything else to add to that, Peter?
Yeah, I think it's important that what we're trying to do at CCICC as well is to find our artifacts. It's interesting how people value things. Like in some ways, maybe we've been taught to not treat our own history as important as other people's histories. But the tools and utensils and jewelry that our people brought 100 years ago that our foreparents used and lived with, I think is just as important a historical record as maybe what you might find at the ROM or the AGO. So what we want to do is help identify those kinds of things, maintain them in a certain way, give descriptions to them so that people who have not born in the Caribbean, who have never seen the Cholha or seen the Bilna or seen any of those things, or know what a Loji is, can understand where our people were kept, where they were spancelled, where they were whipped, where women were separated from men, where children were sold to plantations, because that's what happened to our people too. And so that's one of the things we want to do in terms of the exhibition. The other thing is that VIP and the magazine is about not only talking about our history and commemorating that history, but also about our present and where we're going, as I said. We want to celebrate the people who are doing things now in different ways. And we want to be able to offer a showcase and support for our younger people or people of any age, really, who are trying new things. This is the place to try it. So it's a big endeavor. We have great hopes for it, and we're well on our way. And we're really proud to be able to really share these ideas with you guys tonight.
Wonderful. Well, you know what? I want to thank you both for your leadership and your vision, to execute. This is by no means your only or full-time job. I know you guys do this as a labor of love in the 25th hour of every day. So I want to say thank you on behalf of the team and on behalf of the community. I really do see your efforts, and I really value your leadership and the contributions that you're making so that all of us can have different lineages. We're not stuck in a cycle. I feel the cycle is breaking, and just to hear the excitement within our meetings, to see the people who are trying to see how they can support, you can tell that people feel something different about this. There's a magnetic pull toward it for the right reasons. And I'm so glad. And I'm so proud to be part of this team, because I truly believe that we're doing something different here. So, for everyone who has tuned in, thank you all for your investment of time and energy into this. This is just the first of several conversations that we're hoping to do collaboratively between the Umana Yana Podcast and the CCICC, because there's wonderful work to be highlighted. And you know what? We're showing, just like we're doing right here today, we're showing that we believe in the spirit of collaboration, where we don't need to compete with everybody. We don't need to do it all ourselves. What did we do here today? We came together and we created something truly special because we knew that we have talents in different areas. So I want to thank you guys for the trust, for the belief, and for the continued dedication to a very noble cause that I know all of our ancestors are incredibly proud of already.
Thank you so much. Just want to say that you guys kept me corralled. You paid attention to what we were saying. You found ways to ask some amazing questions. So I really, it gave me a real chance to think again. And so for me to at least formulate my ideas in an organic way. So thank you so much for a terrific experience, really. Thanks again.
You're so welcome.
Thank you, Josh.
You're welcome. All right. Well, to everyone, until next time, we'll chat soon. Take care.